In this step-by-step tutorial, I'm going to show you everything you need to know to create and run a webinar in WebinarJam. If you're watching this video, you're probably already considering WebinarJam, and you know that WebinarJam is one of the most powerful, fully featured webinar programs that is also really competitively priced compared to a lot of other solutions out there in the market. And what's awesome about it is there's nothing to download. It's all browser based, which can really help your attendance. But in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to create and set up a webinar really quickly. And I'm going to jump right into it, but before I do, what I recommend is that you follow along step by step with me, because that's what's really going to shorten your learning curve. So if you haven't started your WebinarJam trial yet, click the link in the description below to get a 14-day trial, and that way you can follow along and really learn a lot faster. And last, if you find this video helpful, hit that like button, drop me a comment down below. Really motivates me to make more content for you just like this, and it really helps the video out. But let's jump right into it. So once you sign in, here we are in the WebinarJam backend. If you also have access to EverWebinar, you'll have that right there. You can switch between the two. But today we're talking about WebinarJam. I also have an EverWebinar tutorial coming up, so just check the channel for that. So if you just click on yourself here, there are a number of things you can configure. You can see your profile, you can see your settings, you can see your billing, and lastly, you can see your integrations with a bunch of different tools. I actually have a video on how to use Kartra and WebinarJam. If you want to check the description down below, you'll see that video if you're also coming from Kartra. But there are a number of other systems you can integrate with. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm not going to go through integrations, but just want to mention that there. Now, hopping back to the main menu, the first thing you want to do obviously is create a webinar. So you simply hit, you guessed it, the Add Webinar button. Now there's two ways to do this. There's the express configuration where you can literally create a webinar in under a minute. So like I'll do that right now. So right now I just clicked on that, and there are three different types of webinars. Right now is like if you're talking to someone immediately and you're like, hey, let's just spin up a room. You just do this and it sends them a direct link and everyone just jumps in. It's kind of really handy if you're in Slack or if you're in a chat program or you're just spur of the moment want to spin something up. Schedule for later is your typical webinar. You can actually have a link, and then that'll happen with a registration form, and then they'll get the invite for when the webinar will take place later. And lastly, always on is kind of like a meeting room, which is interesting, is you can just have this permanent session where people can hop in and out of. So depends on your use case here, but I would say that for the vast majority of people, this is probably the one they're going to be interested in, at least initially. And so I'll go through this one. So pretty simple. This is a private field right here. It's only for your name. This is just what you're going to call it, webinar test. This is actually the public title, so we can just call it whatever. There's a description. It's also public. A test webinar. So you just obviously put something in there. You have your language. You can have different language settings, but I'll have it here on English. Here are the presenters. So you can see me, and you can add as many presenters as you want. You just hit confirm there. And so here we have the webinar schedule. Now, people always ask me about this and what are the differences? And I'll kind of explain it like this. A single session is literally like you go to a show. It happened one time. That's it. But it's the same session. Like you can do the same show another day, but it's the only session. Multiple sessions is like a mini series. So maybe there's like a 5-part webinar you're doing. And so when someone signs up, they sign up for all of them at once. So let's just say you're like, hey, there's a 3-part event, and on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's happening. And so part 1, part 2, part 3. And then when they sign up for all 3, as opposed to this one, they're signing up for one day, but you can repeat that event, but it's going to be the same content. And lastly, recurring series of sessions is when it's just like a ongoing series. For example, you might say, hey, every Thursday we do this kind of session with your audience. Really helpful for, let's say you're doing training every week, or you have a running series where everyone can join in every week, or live group coaching or something. Then that would be a more perpetual thing or a long-term thing. But keeping it simple, let's go with single session. And by the way, you can just see the fields are the same over here, but let's say single session. First name, email, that's all they're going to enter. And we're just going to select a date. Let's say we're running this on Monday at 2 a.m. because we're crazy. We know it's a morning thing. And we go add. And again, like I said, you can have multiple sessions, so you can run that same event. If people don't want to show up at that time, then they can show up maybe on the 14th at a reasonable time period, like let's say 1 p.m. You can see that. So essentially it's the same session and you have just multiple times people can sign up. And this right here, time zone conversion, will just change the time zone for your visitors, which is really convenient. Then what we do is we do the registration page design. By the way, a lot of these steps I'm doing in the 60-second quick start guide. They're also repeated in the full setup I'll go through. So when I go through those steps, I'll just go through them quickly because I've already shown you here. So essentially what we're doing here is we are picking a registration page. This will be the page that people opt into your webinar from. You can see there are a number of templates to choose from. You can preview them over here. You can go ahead and customize them. I'll just mention one thing before we customize them. It does have split testing. And so you can make an A variant and a B variant. And what that means is that you can see which has a higher registration rate. So you would set up 2. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to keep that off. But it's a really powerful marketing tool. If you are more advanced, I would recommend you always do that. But let's go through the simple version. Let's just go with the standard landing page. We click on customize. And really simply, we just, as you can see, we picked a really simple landing page. We can just change this. We can change this settings here. Can see the host, and you can see that they have the option to register down here, and then we can preview our changes. Pretty simple. It's just a WYSIWYG editor, right? If you've used any other tool, there's not going to be any surprises here. And when we're ready, we just go save and exit. It's worth noting that if you're using Kartra along with WebinarJam, Kartra is a product made by the same company as WebinarJam, you'll see there's a lot more templates you can use and you can easily integrate the two. Again, I have a video down below on how to do that and what the benefits would be. But again, totally not required. Just mentioning it for those people who do also have Kartra. And the next section is email notifications, and it's pretty self-explanatory, but essentially it's the auto communications, which are really important to help your webinar attendance. So you can configure a number of things, but sign up confirmation message. So you can see they've already done that, and there's these dynamic tags for you. And it's just, hey, you've registered, here's the live link, here's the room password if there is a password. And it's just that auto confirmation that sends immediately. You can add a pre-webinar reminder saying, hey, reminder, your webinar starts in X number of hours. Make sure you show up. And you can make as many of these as you want. So you can do 8 hours in advance, then maybe 4 hours, then maybe 1 hour. Again, don't annoy people, but you can make as much as you want. The next one is 15 minutes. It's just a, hey, your webinar is about to start. And of course, following your webinar, it's really important to send those follow-up emails for a number of reasons. One is you may want to send that replay link. So for the people who registered but didn't attend, which is usually about 50% on average, as well, you want to create those sequences that say, let's do the next thing together. Especially if you're offering a free webinar, it's the next stage in your funnel. Hey, you attended the webinar. Here's the other thing if you want to learn more, whether that's a paid product or your next free offer, just to get them moving along in their customer journey with you. I will say again, as you can see, pretty self-explanatory email sequence. And if you use Kartra, you can do some of the more advanced email sequences with split testing and with templates and with all kinds of things. Again, video down below if anyone's interested in that, but certainly don't need it. Now, once we've done that, we would go to finish and we are done. Now, I went through that really slowly and went through every single option, but as you would imagine, if you just bang through that, you would just hit next, 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 next. In under a minute, you would have your webinar set up. So once we create our webinar, we can see here that we have the option to run a test and actually get your links. It's really important you run a test. So if you run a test, what it's going to do is it's going to create a clone of your webinar temporarily where you can test it worry-free without messing anything up. So here you go. You can see this is a link to your registration page. So you can just test your registration process. You can say, hey, how would this work? If someone says register, is that the way I intended the registration system to work? And you can see how that works. You get to test every single component of your webinar, which is awesome. So you can play around with this registration form without worrying about junk data. then you can see the live room as a presenter. So you're saying, okay, what's the presenter view? And you can even email this information out. You can see here, but let's just say you want to do that. You can just hit live room, but I just want to do it in incognito because I want to show you that you don't have to be logged in. You can see it gives you some tips here. You can do your mic test and your video test. So it's not letting me do it because I'm using my camera to record myself. So for this part, I'm gonna actually take myself off the screen. Okay, here we are inside the webinar system. So I have multiple cameras going so that you can see me and you can see me in the corner. Most likely your configuration isn't this complicated and you're not making a video about you making a webinar. So I'm gonna assume you're not, but here we are. So you can see basically within our system, we can turn off our camera, we can turn it on, we can do our audio off, or you can turn it on. You can actually screen share. You can do a number of things once you're within there. So also here, you can hit the go live button for when you're ready. And what this is going to do is, so this is kind of like your back room. You're getting everything set up. Once you hit go live, then it's going to start the event. There's also this panic button. And what this does is it's really amazing. If the room is frozen or it's becoming unresponsive, all your presenters and attendees will be instantly redirected to a fresh room and the live broadcast will continue where you left off within seconds. So it's like if things are just having hiccups, you hit this button and it reboots the entire webinar. I've never seen another system that has that button. Thankfully, I've never had to use it, but it's awesome to know it's there if you have that plan. Now on the right-hand side, you have settings. So you can see you can enable chat if you want to let people talk. And that's really cool. If you want to increase engagement, you can see who your attendees are. Again, here's the chat right there. You can do polls. And what's great is you can do polls on the fly. Hello, 1, 2, and you can actually have those happen on the fly. You don't have to actually configure them ahead of time if you don't want to. Offers is another amazing thing. So you can actually have an offer right now, let's say, right? And you can have an image or you can have a button URL. Actually, right now we have our whatever program for $50 off or whatever it is. So you just have to configure this correctly. Files you can add, you have slides you can add, which will show the person in real time. So this is just to share files with them. If you have some handouts you want to give them, or you have other file types that you want to share with your attendees. Slides are pretty obvious. Once you actually do the slides feature, it's going to put that presentation up for you. And so I'll do that right here to show you how that works because it's pretty cool. And once you hit start, everyone will be able to see this and you can just advance the slides on this presentation. And this way you're not screen sharing and it's a lot more clear for all your attendees. But of course you can screen share. Likewise, when you add a file, people will be able to download that. When you actually play a video, it'll play for everyone. And I actually want to show you that because it's pretty cool. So here I am. I just posted in a YouTube video. And once I hit play video, what it's doing in this video, I'm going to show you how to generate and convert more leads. Is it's injecting the video, which is amazing. So what you can do is you can actually share this video and it's going to play for everyone. And as soon as it's done, you go back on air. So this is also a really great feature if you have like a pre-recorded pitch or you have a trailer or something and you're doing this webinar and you got this perfect pitch or this perfect trailer or this perfect little snippet you want to play that you don't want to have to do live. You can do this. It'll switch it. It'll, whether it's a YouTube video or if it's hosted somewhere on Vimeo or Vistia or Kartra, if you're using Kartra, obviously, then you can do that. So let's exit and go back. And by the way, everyone, I'm going through a lot of this really quickly because as you can imagine, there are a ton of features in WebinarJam. So I'm just trying to hit on the most important things to let you see how it all works. But at a high level, that is really all of the configuration pieces. The next thing is also, if you have that specific plan, there is also a control room. So if you do have an operation where you have separate presenters and you have an administrator or moderator, there's is actually a back room where they can really start to moderate everything. They can see the chats, their polls, the offers, the videos. So you can see they can run that from the back end as just an administrator. That's how you run a test and you can test everything out. And you can also actually get the real links to the real webinars webinar by clicking your links, and you'll see it's exactly the same as what you saw. Also, what's a really cool feature is this direct link to live room. Let's say you want one of your employees to join, or a colleague or something, and you don't want them to have to go through the registration process, or someone is having a crazy time with the registration and you're just like, okay, look, just come to the webinar. You can actually send them a direct link to the room and skip the whole webinar process. Can really help with some of your more audience members who might be a little bit more technically not as inclined. So again, you won't get their contact info, but I would do that if you already have their contact info, and it's just like a fail-safe. And lastly, just remember again, there's nothing to download with WebinarJam, so that's actually a really powerful thing. Unlike, say, something like Zoom, there's no client, or GoToMeeting, there's no client for anyone to download. And this is really important because a lot of organizations do have restrictions on installing things, so it's always handy to have it just run in a browser. So that is essentially how you run a webinar using the quick setup. And once you go to analytics, you'll actually be able to see this webinar, and you'll be able to get the metrics for all of this. Now, of course, this was just a test, so I just made it, but you can see the kind of data that you would get. You'll see your sign up rate, your registrants, you'll see the live attendees, and you can see pretty self-explanatory. You can see how many sales you got. Let's say you did an offer. Let's say you actually did a paid webinar, which is what I'm going to show you as well in the full configuration we go through. So you can see right here and all the data about your emails. You can also see your list of registrants. And of course, I don't have any here because I just threw up a test, but you would be able to see all the registrants, who attended live, who didn't attend, who left before a specific timestamp. Really important, because there's a big difference between, say, people who attended for 2 minutes and left, and someone who stayed all the way to the end. And those would be, of course, your more qualified leads, right? That you might want to put into a different sequence or may warrant manual follow-up. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is how to do the full setup and some of the more advanced things you can do. So if you go to add webinar, you'll see express configuration and full configuration. Let's go to full configuration this time. And again, let's just do schedule for later, because that's most likely what you're doing. So again, webinar name, that's the private name. I'm going to go through the sections, especially that we already did, really quickly. Webinar title, that's the public one. That's the description we talked about. So those are the same settings. Now, this is a really powerful feature. You can actually have it so that it shows up in WebinarJam's marketplace, so you can get more attendees. This is absolutely free, or it's included with what you're doing. So you can see that there's an audience here, and they're helping to market your webinar for a number of different courses. So unless it's a private session or something, and especially if it's a free session, I would always recommend you do this and list it there, and you can see you can select a category. But for the sake of simplicity, let's just keep it private here. Presenters, just like we set up here, you can add additional presenters, and you can also mark them as a moderator if you have that feature like I talked about with the back room with the control panel. But let's just say we have one presenter here. You can add more. And streaming service. This is another really cool feature. You can simply run this through WebinarJam, or you can actually run this through YouTube. Now, again, for the sake of simplicity, I won't go through this process here, but essentially, if you have an account that's verified, there's a number of views you need, there's a number of followers you need, so I think it's the same as the monetization privileges, then you should be able to use this functionality. But I'm just going to go through with the simple one, but this is really, really powerful, of course, for people who do have a YouTube channel, such as myself. So we hit confirm all of this. Next section, schedules. So this is the exact same as the quick setup, so I won't go through it again, but single session, just set this up for any time. And again, as I talked about, what the differences are in all of these sessions, you can configure it as you want. Confirm that there. Registration, a little bit more details here. Again, we already went through the templates, so that's how you do that. So the next thing is your form. You can actually change the form outside of the template if you do the full configuration, as you can see here. Right, so I'll just pick something different. You can preview it here. You hit confirm. So it's just a template thing. So the next thing is you can actually add additional fields. And you can see here, there are some fields that you can add if you want to make your forms a little bit more elaborate. And you need different fields for your CRM. Maybe you actually need last name, so you can actually add that in there if you need it. The next thing is a really cool feature. It's called Enable Auto Subscription. And what this does is gives them a checkbox where they can opt in for auto subscription. And what this lets you do is then opt them in automatically to future webinars. And when I say automatically, what you still have to register them, but you have their consent. Again, I'll leave that off, but a really powerful feature. The last part here is free versus paid registration. So most people, if you're using this as a top of the funnel lead generation device, are going to go with free to register, but you can actually charge for a webinar too. And the way this works is you actually need a payment gateway. Now, obviously there are so many different payment gateways, so I won't go through it all, but I'll explain it at a high level how it works. Now, you charge a fee, whatever it may be, right? Let's say it's $25. And now you link to your checkout page. So if you're using something like Kartra, you can set up the product there in Kartra, but you can use any payment gateway like I talked about. So you would add like the landing page or the checkout page here. And then following that checkout process, then you would set the confirmation page in that system to be this. So then once that payment happens, it goes to this. And then that's how the system knows that that person paid. So if you're following along, you might say, hey, if someone actually has this URL, could they just bypass things? Yes, they can. So make sure you don't give anyone this URL. But again, let's keep it simple. I'm going to go free. And you can actually password protect it. Now, this is another more advanced system. Maybe if you're doing paid, you want to have a master password on top, so that just in case there's a redundancy that someone does get that URL, they can't attend because you didn't email them the master password, right? So there's options here. You can have a different password for each attendee and the system will generate that. But again, let's keep it simple. Let's go with no password needed. Notifications. So you can do your WebinarJam gateway, or you can do your own autoresponder. You can do it with Kartra again, and it's a lot more integrated, but because they're both the same company. But again, you can do WebinarJam email notifications. We already talked about this. It's the exact thing we just went through. You can create more emails. Integrations. Again, we talked about this. You can do an integration with any of these systems if you want to do a different autoresponder instead of the one built in. Again, I have a video on how to do that with Kartra if you'd like. You can also do some third-party tracking if you want, a little bit more advanced, but let's just keep that off. Finally, there is the thank you page. Thank you. Here's the link to the webinar. Really simple. Or you can do your own custom thank you page. If you have another system, again, like a landing page builder, Kartra, whatever it may be, then you can do that if you'd like, or you can just keep it simple here. You can also add a survey if you want once they sign up. So it's a kind of cool feature there in the thank you page. You can keep it off. And finally, you can actually customize your thank you page design. And again, you could just hit customize just like you did the registration page. It's just WYSIWYG, click and edit. Now, you can also do some good customization here on your live page. So you can set a timer, which is always really a good device for building time pressure and just building excitement. So you can see there's that timer there, and you can customize that countdown page if you'd like. Again, just like all the pages, you can preview them and hit customize. I won't do that. You can actually change the design of your room. This is just templating. You can just see different colors. Nothing really to see there. Now you can actually add your polls. Unlike with the quick setup, you can set your polls up ahead of time if you'd like. Again, you can also run them live. You can also set up your offers ahead of time. So if you don't have an administrator and you're running this alone, I really recommend you set up your polls and your product offers ahead of time so you're not scrambling to do that while talking. Likewise, you can actually have those video injections set up so that you can trigger them at any time. Handouts, same thing, and slide presentation. So I really recommend, again, if you don't have someone helping you on the administrative side, that you set this stuff up ahead of time. And you can actually have it so that it records a session or it doesn't, and it's all automatic, so you don't have to worry about it. So if you set this on, it's going to automatically do that. So I'll leave it off for now. And there we go. We've created a new webinar. Now, the other thing I'll just mention quickly is if you remember our original webinar, if you did do the quick setup, you can still go back to full configuration and get access to all of those things. So sometimes what I like to do is I'll just run through the quick configuration and then I'll come back and customize it a little bit afterward if you want to do something a little bit quickly. But if you have the time, you can obviously run through the whole thing first. Also, there's this log function here where you can actually get some quick information, some quick analytics. Again, obviously we didn't run the webinar, so we didn't have that, but that is also available there. So I just covered everything there is to do in WebinarJam. There are a lot of other features for nuanced use cases. For example, while running a webinar, you can actually bring someone up, an audience member, onto the screen if you want to have more engagement. So there are features like that. There are so many more other specific use cases and features that I didn't cover because of course I didn't want to make this video 5 hours long, but that really should give you a good example of how the tool's used, how to create a webinar, how to run one. Now, again, if you haven't tried WebinarJam, click the links in the description below to get access to a 14-day trial. I also have other WebinarJam videos on my channel, so definitely check out the channel if you want more of that. I also recommend you subscribe so you can get all of my new WebinarJam videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.